Max Gorlin, Melbourne Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club.
Trent Cotchin from the Richmond Footy Club.
Scott Pendlebury from the Collingwood Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Patrick Cooch from the Carlton Footy Club.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows.
This is Tom Mitchell from the Hawthorn Footy Club, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Hey friends, you got MJ from the Coaches Panel. I hope you're well. And gosh, can you believe it? We are 5 rounds into your 2022 season. Yeah. By Monday evening, you're a quarter of the way through your fantasy footy season. Man, this year is flying, and it's why the moves you make this week and probably the next month are really critical. It's why on this episode, we have to get one of our favourites and a regular long-time member of the Coaches Panel on. I got Kane. Hello, mate. How are you?
Really well, MJ. Does it feel a little bit more relaxed that there's no game tonight on a Thursday night? Like, does it just maybe let us breathe? Because obviously we know last week that was stressful, wasn't it? We had a game that started before we had teams. We had another game that started on Good Friday before we had final teams. We had, a game on Monday. We didn't have those. So there's all those things. I think this feels a little bit more normal with the footy starting on a Friday. We get a bulk of teams on the Thursday. Mm-hmm. We do have obviously a funny fixture in terms of there's 3 Sunday games and 2 Mondays. So there's actually not much action across the first
heavy late
couple days.
Action.
Yeah. So that's going to be fascinating. But I think it feels like we've got through that stage where it feels like when you're sideways early, at least you've got it before a price movement. We had that big into round 3 where, the Heenies, the Englishes, the Crippses, Sicily, a lot of people plunged on Hewitt and plunged on those guys before that price movement. And now we've come out of that phase, haven't we? Those guys have gone up from anywhere from 50 to 150K, depending on the format. So
correct.
They're really, basically at the form they're delivering, they're pretty much priced at that. So we get it's a really funny time when you're looking at your upgrades. Are you going on form that you've seen and thinking that might continue? Or as we often say here, going, well, this is a 110 guy that started the season at 95. Like, what does that mean? That should mean going forward, he's closer to 120. So I always find it fascinating how people choose their upgrades, because we're obviously into that season. Cows haven't quite topped out. Maybe some of them have if they popped early.
Yeah, sure.
But it's a funny phase because it gets to that point, MJ, doesn't it, where you go, I can do an upgrade, but it's very rare that upgrade at this time of the season is a big dog. We just don't have enough cash generation across our team yet to take 2 cows to a new rookie,
one up
and
one
a
down.
big dog. So it's always fascinating. I find, do you just do a double downgrade? Do you store a little bit and just take a hit and play that rookie an extra week to get to the big dog? Or do you just try to go, no, this guy's value and it's good enough? And that's where I think AF with the more trades and maybe Supercoach and DT with a little bit less, they can have a little bit different strategy and different team makeup. And obviously the loopholes is an enormous part of playing any cow. So there's a lot to get through, and it's crazy. It's only been 5 rounds.
It's nuts. Really, the next 10 weeks is what sets up your year. I know you're like, well, that's like round 15, MJ, and then we're in the bus run home. But success in the first 5 weeks is generally on your premiums deliver. You get rookie roulette right, and your stepping stone / mid-price guys deliver well. That's if you've done those 3 things over these first 5 weeks, chances are your ranking is really, really in a strong position. However, it's the moves you make between round 5 to 12 before the multi-buy, and then the 3 weeks of the multi-buy round where trading is now king. When you time it right, getting to the right premium at the right price point with the right fixture matchup, jumping off the right cows onto the right other ones. It's this critical 6 weeks is where you will see some coaches surge past other coaches in the game.
And it's so funny, MJ, because we're only 5 rounds in, right? Like, I was looking at a guy like Lockie Neal in Supercoach, and you see the average 138, and you go, oh my God, like, wow, hasn't he been brilliant? Yeah. And he has. But when you look at the numbers, the number next to it, I see, is a 3-round average of 117. Yeah. And you go, that doesn't seem right. But when you drop a 198, excuse me, you forget how much of an impact that has. And that's what I always think with those big scores is when you've missed them, it does become really difficult for me to pick them up, because I start thinking, that's the score that takes your average from, a 120 to a 126 or 127 in Supercoach. So
that's right.
Those premiums, like you said, if you've had a Brayshaw, a Neil, a McRae, those type of guys, are they stabilising? Because I think we saw guys like people who had Short and Doherty, first 4 weeks, happy days. And, Doherty's score was still in the 80s in Supercoach, but it's a little bit underwhelming. And Short's was obviously disappointing, especially with a donut in the last quarter. I think people couldn't believe that. But that does start to happen, just because they're 110 for the first month. It only takes a little game here or there, or on the flip side, someone who's underperforming to have a good game. And that really starts to right the ship, doesn't it? Because that's the tricky part about this time of year.
Yeah.
Is what you've seen so far sustainable? And is there a new role? Is there shifts? All these sort of things that maybe you think will keep going on with it? Or has it just been a red hot start to the season, or vice versa, a sluggish start? Because it's only 5 rounds. Like, we've got another 18 rounds of this. We've got buys to deal with. We've got all those sorts of things. So I find it really, really fascinating. And I think cows is always what shapes it in MJ. I always find it interesting when people are saying, I'm planning for the buys. I want to have this many from this round, this many from this round. and I love it. And we love planning for the buys.
Yeah, sure.
The tricky part I find is you're entirely predicated on what rookies come through. If every good cow that comes through, and coincidentally, the ones we've got next week are both round 12 in Hayes and Ben Hobbs.
Yep.
We're taking them, aren't we? We're taking them because that's the buy. So I always find that's another element that as much as we go, I want this premium for this buy, all of a sudden our Rochelle's, our Horn Francises, all these guys that we sort of had, this will slip in here. The downgrade options might all present from that one buy round.
Correct.
And it can throw everything out of whack. So I always find that another element that often gets overlooked is that our hand is really forced because we always need to go one up, or ideally one up, one down. And we're stuck. Whatever that option is, we have to pretty much take them. We don't get to pick and choose our rookies on buy round often, do we, MJ? We don't usually have enough that we go,
very rarely.
Not doing you. So where do you want to start? Is Grundy the biggest talking point you think?
I reckon we do need to talk about it, because normally at this point in time of the season, when you have an underperforming premium, now it's probably more noticeable in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team than Supercoach, but definitely Supercoaches will have the same frustration. Maybe it was just a fortnight ago, you're going, right, I'm moving Gorn on, or a premium ruck on, going to get myself a Crip Sahini and another premium, and I'm going to open up the loopholes of English, Bruce, Hayes, Dixon, whatever it was. This is normally the time of the year where the standard advice is back your premium, build around the failed scores, hope that they come good, and if not, address the issue at the buy. I think for most positions, most years, that might be fair and valid. However, in the ruck division, we've got some fascinating options this year. We've got on the bubble in Dream Team and Supercoach, Braden Bruce. He's playing this week. Anyone that thought he wasn't was kidding themselves. He's got incredible job security. Sam Hayes, another ruckman who will be on the bubble the following week in Dream Team and Supercoach, and very affordable this week in AFL Fantasy. Barring injury or suspension, he'll get the good run of the 3-month injury of Lyset. He's got that job security. You've got the DPP options that have rolled through there in Hayes, Dixon, and Cherry. And then probably one of the best starting squad selections of the year in Tim English, who's now really a viable top 6 forward as well. So normally the advice is hold. Is it the same, Kane, in your eyes, given all those other variances I've just listed through there for us?
Yeah, so maybe we'll start with AF, because AF with the utility does give you an extra option to carry. So if you've got Gorn and Grundy in AF, and just say you're eyeing off Bruce this week, or you've already got Bruce at R3 as a bit of a cash generator, it's not a drama to slot in Hayes to the utility. Sam Hayes, that is. You can get all of them. So maybe you just play on in that regard. But I think Supercoach in particular is the one, because Bruce and Hayes, they're better in that format. They're very good.
Hit-outs to advantage.
Hayes is better player. Exactly. He's rewarded more for his scoring, and he showed that on debut. He's more of a pure tap ruckman that gets a lot of points, sort of the way Jared Witz scores. Yeah, when Jared Witz is really on, like, it's the hit-outs to advantage that really send him over the edge. So my worry, if you're a Gorn and Grundy owner in Supercoach, you got a really hard decision to make, because if your stance is you don't want to sacrifice a Gorn and Grundy,
Mm.
Well, you're then saying to potentially the competition, I'm not taking someone that I believe can generate, in Sam Hayes' case, 150 quite comfortably, maybe more with that role that he's got and the assurity he's got going forward. He would have to get injured himself, in my opinion, to be out of the team.
Yep, agree.
Or Braden Bruce, again, who's more expensive, but
I think he's got about 200K in him.
As a result, he's putting up better scores. So you're looking at two cash cows, which from now to the rest of the season might be the two best cash cows we get.
Yeah.
You don't get many cash cows that have, a secure best 22 role.
No.
One is definitely the starting ruckman, and I think Bruce is, the starting ruckman too, but maybe there's a bit of a share.
Sure.
We'll note that he's only playing high 60s, low 70s time on ground. So for Flynn to potentially take the 30 that he's off the ground and then spend, the rest of his time on ground as a forward, I'm really curious. Obviously, at this point of recording, we don't know the team. Keith actually plays in defence and then pinch hits. So it's a bit different. They would be changing quite a bit to go, Flynn, who's a forward ruck. So I'm curious about that balance. But I think for Bruce, again, he's only playing such little time on ground that I think he just keeps rolling the way he rolls. So do you want to give up two massive cows and, maybe on the flip side, take a Roses or take a Hobbs, which Roses had two good games, but, he does worry me with that role on the side he plays for that.
Yeah. Small forwards aren't the safest
you probably
scorers.
And MJ, what do we say? The time you want to see your cows play their best game is not their first two games. You're only getting one price movement from that first 70. You're only getting two from that second 70. So
that's right.
If there's a 30 or a 20, that's, which is a possibility with the role he plays, all of a sudden that's really stunted. And I don't see him as a lock in that side. There's a lot of guys that are chomping at the bit to get into that side. It's far from settled. And then, Hobbs as well, who knows? He's only played the one game, looked good.
But Stringer and
Merritt
look very close from everything coming out of Essendon.
That's the thing. So I find that really hard. So the question you got to ask is moving Grundy. Again, there's a bit of a form dip. Last week was obviously a poor score. There's not going to be another game this year where he doesn't take a mark or lay a tackle.
Of course.
Very confident of that. We know it's a tough matchup, all that sort of stuff. I think personally he bounces back, which makes this decision
even harder.
More difficult because the time to move him on, if you're going to move him on, is probably, it has to be almost now because
now or never.
The price is only going to go down. Yeah. So do you want to give up those cash cows? That's what you got to decide. How good do you think Hayes and Bruce is? Because the cash they might generate might save you the trade that you're going to do sideways from Grundy. And what I mean by that is if you've got, which as you mentioned, MJ, before, all the ruck forwards we've got now, you've got one in your side. So if you're trading out Grundy, and let's just say it's Grundy to Hayes, and you've got that ruck line now that maybe is some combination of that just to get Hayes on the field. Maybe it's Gawn, Bruce and Hayes or some variation of that with English. That sideways, that obviously now other cash cow is going up to a premium in any other line.
Yeah.
But if you're weighing up, let's just say it's Grundy and Ward to Hayes and Petrarca. I think he's a guy that's a bit of a flavour with his price and what he's done.
Attainable too. Yep.
Now people will be saying, well, that's quite sideways, to do that, to do that move. But then also I think, but if Hayes is going to, make 100, 150 more K than Roses, that might save me an upgrade on the back end. Like that sideways move. That's the thing that I think you've got to start weighing up in your own side. Is if I miss a big cash cow because I didn't want to sideways a premium, well, it can be more trouble. Like if Roses makes 60, 70K and Hayes makes 230, that person's got 160K. Like that might just turn a Horn Francis to that D6 you need or that D7 you need. And I think in the argument you're going to make in that, you probably think you're getting more out of a Petrarca than a Grundy. And also you might be you might think Sam Hayes or Bruce, for example, will give you more points than a Ward, than a Rochelle. So I think for me, if I'm in that position, it is more about not wanting to miss Hayes and or Bruce
rather than Grundy
than it is about Grundy's form. Because I do think he bounces back. But I think, do I really want to miss both those cows? Now,
Yeah.
maybe you say I can miss one, and that's up to you. But I'm not seeing Roses and Hobbs as cows that are guaranteed to make 100, 150K.
I agree.
Like they might. But,
Let alone play every week for the next 6 weeks.
but MJ, in that role, you know what a ruck can do. Like Hayes wasn't great, and it's a 70 in Supercoach.
Yeah.
What if
and
it's
to
a
be-
120?
What if Boak, who had a shocking game, has a
Well,
great
Ollie
game?
Wines is back, MJ. That's
The
a pretty good guy
Brownlow
to hit the ball
medalist
too.
is back.
So
I agree.
that's-
It's not about Grundy per se. It's the same with people that traded out of
No.
Max Scorn a fortnight ago. It's like, yep, you might have missed 2 good scores, but that was the risk. However, it's not about Gorn. It's about the things that happened elsewhere. Now, maybe you got
It's about the
hamstrung
cows.
with that. Maybe you went to a Heaney and a Cripps and a something else. Sure, okay, but these are the variations and ingredients, because at the end of the day, while you still want to be maximizing points on field and banking them, you're still trying to generate and maximize the cash as best as you can. Just ask those that, using Supercoach, I suppose, as the illustration, traded out a Josh Rochelle a fortnight ago after that Port Adelaide game and went, oh, yeah, he's made me 40 odd, 50 odd K, but I've seen a 30, I want off. Well, what does he come out and do the next week? Bang, goes and gets a ton, up another 30 odd K. Actually was relatively quiet against the Tigers for 3 quarters and then pretty much put on 60, 70% of his scores in the last quarter when he probably was that magnetic option.
And he missed 2 goals as well, MJ. That's
And he
the
missed
thing.
2
He had
goals.
a couple of gettable shots. So
yeah, all of a sudden you've got these guys that still have money to make
quick.
and re-spark quickly, because what we are getting now is dead cows as well as a lack of options. So a Sam Skinner, barring injury, probably a dead cow. A Dylan Stevens, you remember a fortnight ago, dropped out of the side. Sydney had 2 or 3 late changes, wasn't even the sub. So he's probably a dead cow too. Who's
Brady
to say
Hoff,
a
MJ
Rogers
as well.
off is another? You're right. Who's to say that in a Kane Baldwin, some might still be stuck with from round 1, let alone a Rogers or a Hobbs, who in a fortnight's time would not shock me, given options.
We don't know about
coming
Hinge,
back in.
MJ. We're not feeling confident as we talk in time.
I think he's a red dot now too, with Miller close, Schonberg needing to come back in, Haitley's.
Well, MJ, and he could even be even worse than a red dot in the sense that if you're the sub and you drop a 10, now this 266K in Supercoach, it puts you in a bit of a bind. Now obviously there's a luxury. Maybe you get subbed on in the first quarter and all that sort of stuff.
Sure, pops an 80 and you're fine.
It does get tricky quickly with those type of guys, and you start going, well, this isn't really how I wanted to play the game. I didn't want to be forced into these type of moves and hanging on by a thread with him. So that's the thing for me, is you have to look at it big picture. It's not just, oh, I cracked it at Grundy, he had a poor score against Brisbane. It's going, whoa, this is a big issue here. If I miss a cash generator in Hayes and a cash generator in Proust that legitimately could be big bucks, like there's no reason on the path he's going that Proust doesn't get to 500K.
No,
there's no reason the way Hayes is going, he can't get to 400.
Yep.
So do you want to turn down 270K? Now, maybe you're saying, well, I'll make that decision next week. But the problem with with pushing it down the road is, Grundy's break even's 150.
And the guy you might be wanting to grab that's the premium, you might miss it.
Yeah, he might get away as well.
Oliver, Petrarca, whoever,
So that's all of the machinations of this that can get really, really tricky. They can get really, really tricky quickly. So I think that's a lot for people to mull on. I think this week, Roses is obviously a popular one because he is actually on the bubble, whereas, Hayes and a Hobbs could be next week issues.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I think with the season we're in, if you don't take them this week, well, you're making a call that you're probably going to have to boost the next week, aren't you, to grab both? If they do what we think they're going to do, which is probably a 60 to 70 score.
Yep.
So now, do you want to do that, or do you think you can pass on a Roses and keep your one up, one down sort of rhythm? Now we know MJ as well. Just ask Aaron Hall owners. Injuries still happen in this game, so that's where you can get out of swing. So the boosts are handy. I always feel like unless you really think you need to, save that boost, because that's where the boost can keep you on that rhythm. If you lost an Aaron Hall and you had the plan to go one up, one down, you can probably go one up, one down, one sideways. You know,
Yeah, correct.
And you can keep up with people. But I don't think we quite know how to use our boost quite yet, do we, MJ? We're sort of forecasting ahead to the buys. Do we think we need 4 trades? Maybe, maybe not. It's opened up a lot, hasn't it, this DPP?
Yeah.
It's got so much flexibility that we can pretty much get anyone any line.
It's
and
amazing.
It's not an issue.
And we've got almost 50 new sets of ones that have come in along the way. And so for me, I'm really fascinated to see how this all plays out. I'm curious, kind of an aside to that. We talk about these guys and getting them at the right price and the right time. We've got a guy like a Bailey Smith who has just started the world on fire to an extent. We're a bit lucky that he missed a game, so he's not as far advanced in his cash movement as we thought. How much do we read into a hot start guy? Back to that point you made earlier about the Neils and the McRaes, as opposed to someone like a Callum Mills, who's had a little bit of a quieter start, or a Petrarca and Oliver, who a few weeks ago had a heavily tagged, impacted game. How much do we put that trust in proven, tested 50 to 100 game premiums as opposed to a highly rated junior that we know has the ability, is currently doing it? That I think a lot of coaches are wrestling with the flavor of the month versus a tried and proven option.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, MJ, and that's always the balance with any fantasy game, is that we love history, don't we? Because we can look at it, we can analyze it. But as we always say, eventually someone has to do it, don't they? They have to have a breakout. You can't just say, "Oh, I'm never going to pick Petrarca that season," when we said, watch him. This isn't the Petrarca that was sitting in the forward pocket. This is a guy he's doing different stuff. And I think if we start with Smith, the thing that makes Smith so fascinating is pedigree. So pedigree is amazing. It's rivals Sam Walsh. It's incredible numbers.
Yeah.
That's a massive tick. Not just pedigree in terms of scoring, but he was a top pick. He was an influential player. We know it took till this year for him to miss a game of footy at the level, like incredibly durable. He's got a lot of footy under his belt. He's played big finals, all that sort of stuff. And then you get to the new age fantasy, which I'll talk about, which is the analytics. So, 5-6 years ago, MJ, we sort of noticed CBAs. We sort of noticed kick-ins, and we try to sort of keep track of them ourselves. But obviously, that's so readily available now. Time on ground was another one that people didn't really pay much attention to. So what makes Smith so fascinating to those type of people who love the numbers is we know the time on ground is enormous. It's enormous for almost any position on the ground. He's getting, what's been made of Ed Langdon, and he plays so much time on ground because it allows a Petrarca and Oliver Irvine another rotation to be fresh. Yeah. And when they're on, they're on. They're not just treading water, they're on. And Smith's doing that. But what Smith's also doing is he's getting CBAs on top of that. And that's a mix that we don't really see. Like, we know that 2020 in the shortened game, allowed guys like Gawn and Neil to play these crazy time on grounds. But Smith's putting time on ground with big CBAs. And again, we spoke about it in the preseason, MJ, that if you can get to 10 in marks, tackles, and goals, you're a bit of a monster. Like, this is a guy that's pushing 12 in marks and tackles. Yeah. But disposals is 36 and 21 of them are kicks. So a lot of those big ball winners, the Crouchers, the Neils from previous years, they didn't go at that 1.5 kick to handball. They were usually
handball
converse. They were usually 1.5 handballs. So Smith's picking up that side of it. It's such a complicated one for me because we know 135 isn't sustainable. The advantage that I will say that Smith has is they're a Marvel team. So the winter months don't impact them, because you watch him play, loves the 1-2 handball, loves the wheel and go when he gets the ball. He's got burst and he's got endurance. Like, he creates space for himself. That's why he's a big kicker. He's a big meters gain guy. So the winter months, I don't think will impact him as much as, you think about it, Brandon Ellis last year, MJ. Once the winter months came, you couldn't play that chip game style, could you? It just dried up. But the Bulldogs, their style does support.
You can do it there more than anywhere else.
135's not obviously sustainable, but he's not priced at that. He's priced as a 110, 115 type of guy.
That's right.
And that does almost feel sustainable. What you're saying though is But could you find a 105 guy that might be able to do that? Could you find 100 guy? And that's where a Mills
Correct.
comes into it. That's where, Miller's getting to that price range where he's cheaper than Smith.
Yeah.
So,
and who would you rather?
So going forward.
Yeah, correct.
So what do you think of Smith? Where do you have him? As I said, 4 of the 5 games, they've been blinders. I feel like Supercoach, it's an easy pass because you think that DT's coming down. We know he hasn't had a goal yet, despite having, I think, 6 behind. So you'd hope that will obviously right itself.
Yeah.
But he is an outside player. What should be a contest, he creates enough space that it is uncontested. So Supercoach doesn't quite reward that. Yeah, and that's great. But where does it level with him? Where does it actually start smoothing out?
Yeah, I agree. I think in Supercoach, as good and as great as he has been, and I think he will be over time, we know the reward that comes with not just effective disposals and effective use of the ball, but winning the hard contested stuff. It would not surprise me too. Remember, one of the guys we picked up this week in the DPPs is a Tom Liberatore. We know that at any point in time, Bevo can make a move and switch out going, we really, and especially with a Lockie Hunter out now for the indefinite period of time, Bailey, we need your run on the outside a little bit more. Let's just make that little bit of a tweak. And all of a sudden that 130 comes down to a 115. Still very, very good, but now you're probably paying for what you're getting at his price point now, whereas you've got a Tuke Miller, who I think is a 2-week buy rather than a now week. I think Oliver, outside of Supercoach, you can buy now. In Supercoach, you could probably wait another week. Petrarca probably is a buy now across the formats. And a Callum Mills is very, very similar. You could probably throw a Rory Laird in there. These are all guys that have now shown us across formats, they are some of the safest 110 players with captaincy ceiling available to them. I think if you're trading into Bailey Smith this week, you're confident he's going 110 to 120 for the rest of the year. That's what you've got to be confident in. I know that feels like a drop of points from his current, 120, 130 odds he's popping out for us, but that's what you're saying to yourself, because to bring him in, probably most teams have, I'm going to include Lockie Neal as a premium in Dream Team and AFL Fantasy. I think that's fair enough to do. In Supercoach, it's a no-brainer. I think most people have 4 premium midfielders. So you've really only got spot for 4 more. Are there players you want to have that you don't have? You missed a Jack Steele or a Jackson McRae and you want to get them? Yes, Tuke is in the gun for you in 2 weeks' time. Is it Mills this week? Is it a Rory Laird in a few weeks' time? Is it a Zach Merritt when he comes back off injury? Do you really want to get an Andy Brayshaw, but you're just waiting for a down week to afford it? Is it a Marcus Bontempelli in Supercoach? There's only so many of these guys you can have. And yep, you're banking Bailey now, but to that point of, can you, save yourself an extra 30, 40, 50K, get a comparable score for the next 16 rounds, and that extra 50K, you can activate that next week or the week after to get a Tuke, to get a Mitch Duncan who's nearly bottomed out, to get a Short and a Doherty who are going to be very achievable now in a fortnight after a quiet
It's FOMO,
spell.
isn't it? Really,
MJ? It really is. They see the guy flying out of the gate and they want it.
And also the thing as well, I think we tell ourselves in this situation is, but if I don't go now, I'm going to have to pay $1 million for him in a game like AFL Fantasy. And I think that's where I come to, is I think this is crazy scoring. It's
amazing.
It's impressive, but he's at 113 to be exact in AF. So
what he's priced at there,
7 points. 7 points is 120. As you said, is there a Mills around the 106 that can get me close enough? And as you said, and even that's not comparable enough just to say, well, he's going to outscore it by 7. He's going to outscore it by 7, because as you said, the next week, now you're sitting on another 50K that you can action something else. So 50K might not sound like much, but it costs
huge.
3 weeks.
It's 70K difference between Mills and Smith in AFL Fantasy right now.
Yeah, and that will add up. That will not that you're going to be maybe always going to take the 70K less option, but
sure,
you pick it right and you get comparable value. That's how people get a better team, and that's why I think in AF it does get different to Supercoach and DT. Because AF, you probably can settle for that 10 to 15 range and just go, let's just get rid of the cows. I don't want any 30s or 40s. And then I'll upgrade the 12th guy to a top 5.
Yeah.
In Supercoach, I always find it fascinating because on DT as well. Because if you do settle, and we've spoken about this in the preseason, if you settle for the 100 guy and don't go the 110 or have to use another trade to get to the 110, that 110 guy will chase those points down. That if you got from a 50 guy to a 100 guy, that 50 points you gained in a week by doing that early, that 110 guy, if you just had to wait one more week and do another downgrade or wait for a bit of a drop in price,
that's right,
they'll chew up that 50 points. Like, think about now, MJ. We just said there's 18 rounds to go now.
Yes.
50 points at 10 a pop. Even if you just had to wait an extra week in the last 6 weeks, they'd chew those points up. So
totally,
you got to make sure you're getting your AF and your Supercoach and DT a little bit different, because it hurts people a lot when they settle in those other formats. And that's the trick though, isn't it? Because you don't have enough cash gen to go up to the 600K guy. As I said, if you think it's Mills and Mills is a bit cheaper, but he can match, that's when you're on your way. And those are the winning moves.
Yeah, those are the key things, because we can all hope and forecast and believe certain elements of we're going to get more rookies, and we will. However, to the point that we made towards the start of this podcast, talking about Grundy, well, Bruce and Hayes have job security. Hayes because of injury and a long-term one. Bruce because he's finally now got his body into a position that he can hold the position that they traded him in for. Really, right now, who are the cows that we have confidence that will get significant amount of games from now to the end of the year? I'd suggest Elijah Hollins is just a matter of time. And he will get significant opportunity. This is the outside of a couple of games last year, he hadn't played for the better part of 2 years of footy due to COVID and his ACL. So it's understandable why the Suns are being a little bit more conservative with the way they build him through there. But there's not a heap of guys as you look through the remaining cows, is there, Kane, that you go job security in check? Because you could, you might get the upgrade premium you want this week and sacrifice a cow 50K on his head this week, only to be trading into a red dot in a fortnight and not realizing it.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it, MJ. I think Hollins, as you said, is the one. The thing as well, that Hollins, how many people took that early score round one using Hollins?
Yeah,
and
correct.
Now, we've been people that say we don't just knock that theory. We've done that ourselves.
No,
because we
big fan of the red dot strategy.
Yeah, we think you can make a lot of points if you got that rookie right, 50 points. If you saved yourself from a poor captain score, 50 points. You do that for the first 6 weeks, you can really put yourself in contention. But where it does sting is when people go, oh, beautiful, I've got a downgrade option this week. It's Elijah Hollins. And you go, yeah, I started him. And they go, oh, well, I'm just accessing 200K. That's where it can get tricky. I think, obviously, Greg Clark's one that he's had his first game back in the waffle. Did well, positive. Limited minutes. My read on it is give him a few more in the waffle. I don't think this is a guy they just think they're going to rush in. I think they know the position they're in. Also, midfield, they've got a few bodies back there now.
They do.
So I think he's a couple weeks away, I would say, which means from a downgrade option, that's great. We want them staggered out. We want them separated.
Yes, it's what we need.
Robin McComb's another one that's with this Hunter news. He had a great VFL game, copped the knock to the ribs, missed a week, and then came back, was brilliant. We know the doggies love, you play for Footscray, you play well, he won the VFL best and fairest, you get your spot on the list. Known quantity at 26 years of age. I think he's around the mark, and obviously the good thing for him is he is 50K less than Hobbs in Supercoach. So that's huge. We love those type of guys. But MJ, I'm not hearing many. We're hearing Miller Bergman might be a guy. We're hearing
Cooper Stevens might be
a guy. Those two North boys maybe with the whole void, but that's a 2 to 4 week void. It's
Ned
not like we're
Long,
talking.
But again, all these guys that we're talking we should see them. But the challenge for us is
we need some attrition, don't we, MJ? We need some guys to go down. That's the thing. But we're talking about a guy like Hinge that 2 weeks ago we loved his job security. And now we're looking at guys like Schonberger going in the team and going, Sloan's out. Haitley's doing well in the Sandful. Like
Miller is close. Yeah.
the squeeze. Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like it does squeeze quickly, and that's where, as I said, like I always find that if you're going to pay up, you pay up for your big mids.
Correct.
Because every year there's always that forward or back that get a role change, and they're 420K in Supercoach, but they match the 520 guys. So that's why for me, if you missed English and Heaney, and you're weighing up them versus a Petrarca or an Andy Brayshaw that's 600 or Mills that's 570, I find that really hard.
Yeah,
because I think you want those guys, and I think you'll find that forward, you'll find that back. Like
they'll pop.
You want your Tyron Thomas of last year. Who is that person? Who is the De Goey of last year?
There's
Who's
always
that guy
someone.
there's always someone. So
and there's a DPP change that will come through again.
Possibly.
We now know.
And that's why it's safe going mids, isn't it, MJ? If you take an alpha mid, they're an alpha mid. If they've 115, 120, you're close enough.
It wouldn't shock
forwards,
me if we saw a Patrick Dangerfield or a Max Gawn be ruck forward, mid forward eligible coming into round 12. Marcus Bontempelli was uber close in so many people's eyes to picking it up. And so I agree. I think, and we've actually got some relatively good forward cows with security and still money to make. Cherry's there for a while. Martin's not dropping away. Rochelle, albeit a bit more hot and cold in his scoring, he's not going anywhere anytime soon. And then, there's a bunch of others that have rolled through to really consider with the premiums you've got. So these are all the factors you make. I know it feels like for some, maybe you're listening to it going, and these are a lot of disjointed little layers and thoughts. The thing is they're all actually integrated.
Well, we can't see
together.
their team, can we, MJ? That's the thing.
No.
Because if you've already got Bruce and you've got him at R2 and you've got Jack Hayes at R3, well, it's bloody easy to get Sam Hayes.
Hayes in a week or two.
But if you're the coach that's got Grundy and Gawn, Witts and Gawn, combinations like that, and it's not English, all of a sudden you have to think about this stuff. And that's why it's, we could always pull our team up and explain our own stuff, but I don't know if that really helps the listeners. That's why we've always tried to keep it broad here and educate.
Correct.
Because you might think you've got, to use a term, vanilla team, but you might have this one DVP that no one else has that lets you go, oh, I can actually swing him here and trade this, but and then everyone else goes, well, I couldn't even do that. I didn't even think of it.
That's right.
As I said, there's always little things in your team and how it's set up that allow for different strategies. But the main takeaway from today is think about Bruce and Hayes. Think about the cash gen.
Yeah.
Think about what you're giving up, what you're gaining by going them and not going them. How does it better your team? And what premiums do you want? It is that time of year where we start mapping out the ideal team we want.
Yep.
But we need cash to do it. So that's always a wrestle. Roses might be fine. He might be great. He might kick 5 and score 100.
Absolutely.
And you miss that. But you got to make calls, don't you, MJ? You can't have everyone.
We learned that with Nathan O'Driscoll last week. For some coaches, didn't it? They missed him. They went, sub round 1, junked it up in round 2 in the last quarter, maybe had a unicorn game against the Giants, and then was questionable to even be right for this 4th game. And now all of a sudden, Crips owners that held him in Supercoach, especially that fielded an O'Driscoll, feel like they're geniuses. Days. However, it was equally as likely that what we saw late in the game hurt and hit him. Like he was off the ground for a significant amount of time in that back half of the game with that really big hit he took. So these are the luck of the dice.
It's sliding doors, MJ, isn't it?
It's all the case. We talk about this all the time here at the Coaches Panel as we say, you need skill to get into the conversation for rankings, but then you need some luck to fall your way. If someone said to me, round 1, a perfect example, round 1, Josh Kelly or Andrew Brayshaw, who scores more by the end of round 5? Most people would go, marginal difference, maybe 5-10 points per game, if that. Marginal difference, maybe 50 points either way. Not the hundreds of points either side of it. And it's these sliding door moments, like we said at the top of the episode, that have defined people's starts of their years so far of, I picked X premium over X premium. I started this cow on field over this cow. The good news is we've had a great start to the year, or a little bit of a sluggish start. You'll still have weeks of great trading now to help you through it all.
Absolutely. Any questions MJ,
We got a
before
couple of
we leave
rapid
the
fire
listeners?
questions because we do need to let you go. So we'll rapid fire our way through some of them. Ian wants to know, what's your lad's thoughts on Jack Sinclair and the possibility of him maintaining form, given the likely return of players like Zach Jones in a week or two, or even to a lesser extent a Billings, albeit different position, but another outside type of player. What's your take on Sinclair? Is trading into him now? He's gone about 100 plus across the formats pretty safely. Is he enough of a top 6 to 10 defender in your eyes?
Firstly, very impressed.
Very good.
Been brilliant. Backed up his runner-up in the best and fairest last year. But at the price, MJ, it's not for me. When I look at those other defenders, I think you can find some other guys that I just have a bit more faith
Short in a week or two, Doherty in a week or two.
Yeah, I think as well, like even guys, you've got guys like Tom Stewart. You've got guys like Jake Lloyd. I also don't like the buy round. That's the thing. If people have got Hewitt, Doherty, Short, Ridley, Whitfield, like you can see how it's a pretty messy backline. So for me, if he's at 550 in Supercoach, what does he cap at? 575 maybe. So for me, you're going to get that price post buy. If you love him that much, wait till he's had his buy,
and then jump
upgrade to him there because. First 3 weeks he was a CBA guy. Last 2 weeks he's been a non-CBA guy, a bit of kick-outs. And credit to the Saints, they're 4-1. So
they've done so well.
What happens, if attrition does come and if they start losing some games,
what does that do to his score?
Let's see. So I think great start. 115 averages Supercoach is unbelievable. Low 100 in the others is great. But find that next guy that's going to have his purple patch.
Oh, I think it's a really good shout. Craig wants to know, he's got a question about Bailey Smith. I think we've already answered that for you, Craig. His next one is, with Aaron Hall out, does the bump come to a Luke McDonald, especially with him now being defender eligible for us?
Very different role for Luke this year. Yeah. So for me, I would say no, in the sense that I just want to see how it actually sets up. And also,
you want to see it settle.
Yeah, because McDonald's been actually playing on people and coming off and intercepting and actually doing a really good job. The poor score was obviously against Brisbane. It was a bloodbath. He was matched up with Cameron at times. But he didn't absorb the kickouts when Hall went off. That was a bit of a mixed bag. Guys like Perez and Young were getting some kick-ins.
Scott got a bit,
We know it was a weird game. It was a bit it was a bloodbath, honestly.
That too was,
So for me, when it's only a 2 to 4 week injury, it's not like Hall's done for the year. I'd be letting that slide. And especially in the Supercoach, it's really hard when you're in a bottom team, to constantly get rewarded. You've got to be, probably have a monopoly on kick-ins and be that sort of guy that Hall was last year, where everything gets funneled through him. So the price is great, and I think the scoring has been good outside of that disaster up in Brisbane. But again, I'd be waiting for something else to happen with someone else. We know injuries do come, or concussion games that really bring those top guys down. So I'd let McDonald slide.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a fair shout. A few questions about Bruce and Grundy. I think we've answered some of those as we talked our way through. Stephen Summers has got just a few. He's got an interesting question. AFL Fantasy. Is it too early to move off of a Jason Horne-Francis to a premium? Or should he be looking at it addressing, for sake of a better phrase, a failed mid-pricer in Matt Crouch? Both options give him the premium he wants. The second trade he's doing is Josh Ward down to a cow. Who would you be addressing the need of more? Horne-Francis, and it costing a little bit more in cash, or Crouch, given he can get whoever he wants regardless?
Yeah, well, I think the thing is, obviously in the week, you would back Crouch to outscore Horne-Francis.
Yes,
I think that would obviously be in a short-term thing. But when you look at Horne-Francis, MJ, you look at his scores this year, last week was a disaster. It was a 56. He gave away 4 frees. And some of those were the tackles, which that's a 7-point swing.
Correct.
Right there. So when I look at him and he's gone 61, 78, 67, 94, 56, he's basically a 70 flat type of guy.
Yeah.
And the
he's
way
like
Crouch
Nick Martin,
is going,
isn't it?
Yeah, he's going, Crouch is obviously capable, but
capable of tons, but he's closer to the
watch.
70s.
Yeah, and the tackling has
Isn't there.
disappeared. So
I'd pick Horn Francis to keep.
To keep. Yeah, me too.
keep.
That's where I'd go, just because I think he's got some more cash. He's got the last buy. Like, not that you're probably thinking you'll hold him that long,
No.
but it does just give you some flex. And I think
you could get him up to a
80,
550, like he's got about.
If you're patient with him, I reckon he can get there. So
it's only 60k away in AF.
It's not that much, is it?
A 70 gets it up another 20, 25k. So let alone a 90 that he did.
I'm in a similar position myself, trying to work that out. But I know he said he could get any player he wants from either. But the point is that cash is going to be there the next week if you do Crouch.
Correct.
And maybe if Horn. So it's never quite as simple as, well, I'm just going to do the same thing anyway, because it always comes into the next week. It limits you to do something else. So it's never just a 1 week play in this game unless it's the last round. Like it always, you might, again, there's no guarantee that if you move Crouch, you'll definitely move Horn Francis the next week or vice versa. There might be someone else that you go, well, and you know what, I've got to get rid of Jack Hayes. He's got dropped riders back in. I want to access
Duncan's
that
now
cash.
is bottom.
So,
you've got to always be 3 to 4
I would
weeks
go
ahead.
Crouch, but I do see that if Horn Francis drops a 50 and Crouch does a 110 that he can, how it hurts.
Yep.
But I think in this case, you're going for a little bit more cash gen and hoping that Horn Francis gives you a 70. Crouch is probably around 90, 85, 90. It's a small hit, but I think the cash is probably worth it. And maybe you've even got a chance to play a bit of a loophole there and have a look at Horn Francis with someone else.
Yep, fair enough too. Two last quick questions before I know we've got to let you go. Mate, Ben wants to know, Raul in AFL fantasy, trade or hold?
He's probably a trade. MJ. Again, it probably depends where you're at. Now, there's always that case, isn't there, when a player's had the asset on him all week and there's articles that come out about, he's very aware that he's not getting easy footy. Yep. Now, we've talked about this before, but game plan. Have a look at some of the game plans.
Yeah.
Suns, the fantasy numbers have plummeted. The marks have plummeted.
Yeah.
No, there isn't much easy ball for anyone, MJ. Look at a Brandon Ellis. So I don't think it's just a Raul issue. I think it's
a team.
It's a game style thing that they're playing. It's not as easy. I still think he actually has a decent week this week, but the break evens at a point. He's sort of stalled his cash gen that it would take a 110 to ignite it, and he's probably gone anyway. So he's probably an easy move for me.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair shout. And then last one, I think a few people are pondering over this, what John's asked. It's for AFL fantasy, but I think we could stretch it out. Is there a problem with bringing in Bailey Smith? The answer is no. But it joins in guys with Dunkley and English. Dunkley and McRae. He's also an English owner. That's 4 dogs. I don't know if the 4 dogs is the concern, but potentially
I'm not worried about that.
The buys could be the bigger concern.
Possibly. There's a lot of flex though, MJ. That's the thing. So like when I look at the defenders, there's not many in that buy round that people have. So, it's Dawson, it's Stewart, it's Lloyd. We know Heaney's a popular guy in the forward line. 13. We know Duncan's now getting a bit of traction that he's had a few games. Mills obviously in the midfield. So your ruck line's probably pretty safe. There's a lot of Brodie Grundy, so they're laughing. They're fine in that buy round. So just have a look at your team. Just have a look. I don't think you cross anything off, because if you think he's as good as, the reason you're picking him, you got to go with him. If you think he's that good value and he's going to make up those points, well, what's the worst case? You sideways a premium just to keep your numbers on field, and maybe you're not an upgrade as advanced as everyone else, but I don't think you're fully ruling it out. I think you got to look at your side and see
what's unique to you,
and look at your DPP. So you might have enough flexibility where you go, like for example, with Hewitt gaining mid, I've got Whitfield and Hewitt in defence as around 12 premiums, and I've also got a guy like Jaden Short. But I look into my midfield, I don't have any round 12s. So all of a sudden, I don't consider Whitfield and Hewitt defenders that round. I consider them midfielders. And a Nick Dacos goes back. So actually have a look and map it out. What's all the position eligibilities and flexibilities you've got? Because especially in AF with utility, you can almost transport. They're so fluid between what position they are. You don't even really have to stress. So have a look, analyze your own team. If you think it's going to be a massive drama, don't go there. But I think if you're going Smith, I don't think a buy round is going to put you off. That's
It shouldn't be
weeks
the
away.
reason. No, it shouldn't be the reason you do. Hey, mate, I know we've got to let you run. We appreciate your work
No
on
worries,
this episode.
MJ.
Thank you, man.
Enjoyed it. Thank you.
If you want to go and check out any more of the other podcasts that we've done, it's available for you at Apple, iTunes, Spotify, Amazon Music, wherever you get your podcasts from. And of course, there's articles always dropping for you at coachespanel.tv. And while you're there, if you've loved what you've got from us so far in 2022, we'd love for you to become a Patreon supporter for as little as just a couple of bucks a month. It helps us do what we do every single week here at the Coaches Panel. I hope round 6 goes your way. I hope you win every element of your leagues, rookie roulette, and your captain crushes it. But until next week, we'll chat to you soon.